Hi guys, it is currently September, which means that October is next month. But October isn't just a month for me anymore. It's also one of the best reading times of the year because October means the return of Victober, and I am so happy to be a host again this year. For those of you who might not have been around in previous years, Victober is a month-long readathon happening in October where we try to read as many Victorian books as we can and set different challenges for you to reach. I am a host this year alongside Katie from Books and Things, Ange from Beyond the Pages, and Kate Howe, and we have so much fun coming up with the challenges and then reading during the month. And I know so many of you have been looking forward to this since the end of last October, and I have too. So first of all, what counts as a Victorian book for Victober? A Victorian book was written between 1837 and 1901, Queen Victoria's reign, and generally in the past we have stuck to reading authors who were born or were writing in England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. The readathon will run from the 1st to the 31st of October, so it gives you plenty of time to get stuck into lots of Victorian novels, and you can read novels, plays, poetry, anything you like. For a quick rundown, this year Ange's challenge is to read a book written by a female author. You get a bonus point if you read a book by an author you haven't read before. Katie's challenge is to read a Victorian book under 200 pages or over 500 pages, so I'm going to try and sneak in one from each on my own TBR. Kate's challenge, which might be my favourite this year other than my own, is to reread a Victorian novel. So it's going to give you an opportunity to reread a book you might have read a few years ago and you want to go back to and read again now that you've read more Victorian novels. Our group challenge this year is to read a book by candlelight. Now this doesn't involve reading an entire 800-page novel by the light of a candle, but you might want to set one evening aside to read a book in a natural Victorian way, which I'm really looking forward to. I think it will be quite cosy and I am really looking forward to that. And every year we also set a book for a group read-along, so you can join in with that if you'd like to. This year we'll be reading two plays by Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest and A Woman of No Importance, which was a lot harder to say because I was sure I was getting the title wrong because both involve importance. And then for my challenge this year, I spent quite a while thinking about it, but as soon as I came up with this idea, I knew that it's one I wanted to go for. And my challenge for this Victober is to read an underrated Victorian classic written during the same year as your favourite Victorian classic. All the other hosts will be recommending books based on their challenge, but mine is a bit harder because there are so many books depending on what your favourite book is. There are so many different books and combinations that I could recommend that I think it would be impossible to include in one video, but I will give you a few ideas. So the route I think I'm going to go down is to pick Wuthering Heights as my favourite Victorian book. It was published in 1847, so I've been looking around the internet googling 1847 in literature to see what was published in that year. For example, one of the books I'd like to try and read is Anthony Trollope's first published novel. You might not think it's underrated because it's Anthony Trollope, but it was not very well received when it was published and is not one you generally hear talked about when people talk about his books. So I'm going to leave the definition of what an underrated classic is up to you. It probably won't be something that was by a major author, although in this case, for example, Anthony Trollope, I want to explore why that novel wasn't his breakout novel, and I want to consider what made Wuthering Heights such a success, even though at the time it wasn't as popular as, say, Jane Eyre, which was published in the same year. And so I'm going to view everything I read for this challenge through the lens of why is this not as popular? What does that say about the time it was written in? And what does that say about what is popular to read now? So because the recommendations are a bit difficult for this challenge, I thought I would recommend to you a few non-fiction books I've been reading in the run-up to Victober, so I can brush up on my Victorian knowledge and find out more about the eras that the books were set in. So at the moment I am reading How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman, which is honestly one of the best non-fiction books I have read in a long time. I love this book so much, and I don't have a copy to show you because I've been reading it on my Kindle, reading it any chance I get because I've been annotating lots, I've been saving parts that I want to film videos on and explore in more detail. And also I quite like reading non-fiction books on my Kindle because then I can just skip over to Google and not lose my page in putting the book down and look up anything that I'm not sure about, or look up pictures. For example, there's a section of fashion, and so I was looking up specific fashion plates when she was mentioning different types. There was a chapter I was reading yesterday about babies' clothing, and I was googling to see what that would have actually looked like because it's not quite the same when you're reading about it. I love this so much because it brings the everyday Victorian person to life, whether that was a working class Victorian person from the slums of London or some of the richer people that lived in Victorian Britain at the time. I think this is a fantastic way of looking at it and thinking about everyday people and what they were doing. It adds a certain amount of humanity to these people, which I really love. I found out so much through reading this book, and one of my favourite things actually has been reading it and comparing it to some of the novels I've read, and then sometimes I'll be comparing it in my head, and then Ruth Goodman compares these scenarios to the ways that they were written about in fiction. So I was reading about the mill industry and I was thinking about how that linked to North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and then a page later she brought up North and South to compare it to, which gave me quite a proud moment in my Victorian reading. And she's also written How to Be a Tudor, which I do have a copy of, but no mentions of that because it's all Victorian fiction in this video. So you also might like to read a bit more about Queen Victoria herself. She gave the Victorian period its name, so you might want to find out a bit more about her and her life. And if you're looking for something that's a good introduction, something that is not as heavy as some other biographies, then I would really recommend Lucy Worsley's biography of Queen Victoria, which sets her life into the different stages: when she was a child, when she was a daughter, when she turned into a wife, a mother, a widow, and so it looks at her through different periods of her life, and I think is quite critical too. So I really liked this, and I love Lucy Worsley's really accessible style of writing. So I do think that something like this will really ease you into it and will teach you all you need to know without being so heavy it takes you 5 months to read. Talking of spending 5 months reading something if you're feeling super devoted to reading about Queen Victoria before Victober starts, I think this is probably one of the best biographies. This is Victoria the Queen, an intimate biography of the woman who ruled an empire by Julia Baird. I'm kind of intimidated by this book because it's so big. This is only 493 pages, but it just feels like such a big book. I mean, it's the same size as my head. It's just so detailed. Lucy Worsley references it a lot in her biography, and it offers a really good foundation and a really good insight into Queen Victoria. It's also really helpful and has got a family tree in there and maps too, and a cast of characters, because there's nothing worse than reading a biography and thinking, I don't know who any of these people are. And I tend to read biographies and pick them up and put them down and read them in sections. So if you're going into the middle and reading something and you haven't quite picked up or have forgotten stuff from the beginning, it's nice to know who everyone is, because that's something that I find quite difficult to get to grips with. I am so excited for Victober. Can it be October already? I mean, October is my favourite month anyway, and then you throw Victober into the mix and I just can't wait. I am counting down the days. I am hopefully, if all goes to plan, going to have lots of Victober videos up talking more about my favourite books from the Victorian period, doing more reading vlogs around the books that I'm reading, and I want to try and bring the Victorian period to life for you slightly more, taking things out of the books and making them feel a bit more realistic, like these were real people. So we'll see how that plan goes, but I am so excited about it, and I really hope hope that you are too. I'll leave all the links and all the challenge information in the description so you can find out more. I'll also leave links to the other hosts' videos where they'll talk in more detail about their challenges, and please go and subscribe to them because their channels are amazing. I feel so lucky to be a part of Victober still because it's something I have enjoyed since the first year. Even when I wasn't a host, I still joined in, and it's so lovely to see it go from strength to strength and see more people joining in every year. So I'll be back in a few weeks with my Victober TBR, but before then I would love to know what you think of this year's challenges and if there's anything you're really excited to read. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!